As a Muslim woman who grew up in a Pakistani home in East London, if there was one thing that stood out about my identity, it was the fact that I was a female. I was somehow different, vulnerable, and most importantly, I posed a bigger threat towards social morals than my male counterparts. The beautiful thing about being a child is that your soul is pure. And as a child, I understood that cultural sexism was wrong. As a child, I understood that the force of good that I can feel within me could never write off half of its population as unequal. As a Muslim, fighting tyranny was my greatest duty to God, and the first injustice that I ever fought was cultural sexism within my own home. Islam was my shield and my protector from this poisonous venom that we know as sexism today. In a world where Islam is associated with everything but freedom, you'd probably be surprised to hear that Islam set me free. Islam freed me from sexual objectification and the sexist norms of the status quo. I didn't have to be accepted by anyone. I didn't need to adhere to a social code. And most importantly, I did not need to be judged by other human beings. God was the supreme judge, and I feared God's judgment alone. Social or peer pressure meant nothing to me. It did not dictate who I was or who I would become. The only opinion that mattered was the opinion of God. Islam freed me from the shackles of sexism and told me that I must aspire to become a great woman, a leader, and a warrior. Historically, God sent down messengers to fight oppression and establish justice. From the oppression that Pharaoh inflicted upon the children of Israel, to the camel that was tortured by the people of Thamud, God sent down a sign to all of mankind, telling them that his creation must never be wronged. Each time a messenger was sent, a new form of oppression was highlighted. God did not forget any of his creation, and when Prophet Muhammad was sent with God's final revelation to mankind, God chose to highlight the oppression inflicted upon women. At a time when women were viewed as passive sex objects in most parts of the world, in Arabia, women started leading wars, becoming surgeons, teachers, and acquiring property rights. In short, women were liberated by God 1400 years ago, and the world's feminist movement began with Islam. Women were among the oppressed that God came to liberate. 80% of the legal material in the Quran focuses on women, from divorce laws to the marriage gift and right to the condemnation of female infanticide. God safeguarded the rights of women and removed them from a vulnerable position. Yet, I studied in a madrasa for 9 years and I never heard these great principles of justice, of gender equality, and the liberating movement that I know as Islam. There was no sign of empowerment in a madrasa that taught little girls like me from the age of 5 till the age of 16. In fact, there was disempowerment, there was segregation, and most importantly, there was a widely accepted belief of sexual superiority hidden under the banner of sexual difference. After realizing that I was studying in a disingenuous institution, I dropped out of my Alima course at the age of 13 and I moved on in my journey to find Islam. I joined various organisations such as YMUK, Respect, Stop the War Coalition, and by the time I was 16 years old, I ended up at MPAC UK. But it was at the age of 18 when I was fighting a nationwide election campaign to oust out Zionist members of parliament that I experienced the most overwhelming forms of sexism. I remember my heart beating as fast as a treadmill as I approached a crowd of men returning from Friday prayers at the mosque. I stood there with a pile of pamphlets, some fire inside my heart, and a passionate voice. As I tried to educate these Muslims about the importance of voting for ethical MPs, I was looked upon as filth, pushed from side to side, and accused of being a shameless woman for having the nerve to stand outside God's house. It was as though God's house was reserved only for men, and was off limits to the other half of God's creation. As I walked away with tears flowing down my cheeks and confusion grasping my mind, I turned to God in pain and disgust, and I blamed him for making me a female. I told him that I could not fulfill these gendered roles that had been constructed by society. I told him that my gender limited me in my dream to be his warrior. My gender limited me in the precious purpose that He had created me for. Since I was a child, my only dream was to lead a change for the sake of Islam. And now my dream was being dictated by patriarchal men whose filthy minds could not see beyond my sexuality. As I prayed to God, I had a moment of realization. A voice inside of me told me that my purpose was greater. I realized that my gender did not put me at a disadvantaged position at all. In fact, it put me in a powerful position. God wanted greater struggle for a greater reward. God created me as a female and put the quest for struggle inside my veins with a clear purpose. I was to break the stereotype and fight these socially constructed gendered roles. I was to declare my right on this earth to live as a free woman, free from sexual objectification, free from patriarchal readings of the Quran, free from labels of sexual deviancy, and free from the male interpretation of sexual modesty. My purpose was to revive Islam as the feminist liberation movement that God intended it to be.